Hi, everybody. This is Bill Young from Berlin Center United Methodist. This is the Gospel of John study. We are in week 4, and this is day 4 of the study. Glad you're tuning in. Today, we're going to be looking at John chapter 9, verses 18 through 34. So let's begin by hearing what this passage has to say.
They still did not believe that he had been blind, and had received his sight until they sent for the man's parents. "Is this your son?" they asked. "Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that now he can see?" "We know he is our son," the parents answered, "and we know he was born blind. But how he can see now, or who opened his eyes, we don't know. Ask him. He is of age. He will speak for himself." His parents said this because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders, who already had decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue. That was why his parents said, "He is of age, ask him." A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. "Give glory to God by telling the truth," they said. "We know this man is a sinner." He replied, "Whether he is a sinner or not, I don't know. One thing I do know. I was blind, but now I see." Then they asked him, "What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes?" He answered, "I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why do you want to hear it again? Do you want to become his disciples too?" Then they hurled insults at him and said, "You are this fellow's disciple. We are disciples of Moses. We know that God spoke to Moses, but as for this fellow, we don't even know where he comes from." The man answered, "Now that is remarkable. You don't know where he comes from, yet he opened my eyes. We know that God does not listen to sinners. He listens to the godly person who does his will. Nobody has ever heard of opening the eyes of a man born blind. If this man were not from God, he could do nothing." To this they replied, "You were steeped in sin at birth. How dare you lecture us?" And they threw him out.
Okay, so let's go ahead and look at the reflection questions, and then I'm going to read some commentary about this week. So the questions for day 4 of week 4 about the passage we just listened to is, have you ever been in a church meeting when 2 or more people blow up at each other? This story in John 9 would be comical if it wasn't so sad. How do you react to this uncomfortable situation? Why is it important in this gospel to understand where Jesus comes from and how should that affect the way we view his identity? And number 3, can you see the spiritual growth of the formerly blind man? Even in the heat of the battle in this scene, what are the indicators of this growth? So I'm going to read some of the commentary now as you look at those questions. And it says, I'm on page 51 and 52 of the book, Understanding the Word. In this episode of the ongoing saga, the authorities have summoned the formerly blind man's parents, and a sword scene ensues. The parents, afraid of the Jewish authorities and of being banned from the synagogue, practice the ancient art of passing the buck. They say only that they know the man is their son and that he was born blind, but as for the rest, since their son was a grown man, they should stick to just quizzing him. As an aside, we are told that the Jewish authorities had already made up their minds that anyone who confessed Jesus to be the Jewish Messiah was to be given their walking papers when it comes to attending synagogue. In fact, even though the man does not say Jesus is the Messiah, they still kick him out of the synagogue. Why they say is that they know Jesus is a sinner, presumably on the basis of his Sabbath behavior. The man born blind replies that he doesn't know whether Jesus is a sinner or not, but as we shall see, he doubts it. But what he does know is that he was once blind, but now can see. The authorities don't believe his testimony. They think he is lying. They ask him a second time, how can he be healed? Finally, they accuse him of being born in sin, which presumably doesn't refer to the original sin, but rather a slur on his parents as well as their offspring. You can sense the exacerbation of the man by verse 27 when he says, I have told you already, and you did not listen. Why don't you want to hear it again? And then in brave moment, he says, do you want to become his disciples too? This leads to an explosion of pure polemics in where a man is falsely accused of being this fellow's disciple. The authorities claim to be Moses' disciple, but then comes a very telling admission. We don't know where that fellow comes from. Remember, knowing where Jesus came from, which is from God, is the key to this gospel for knowing who he is. The authorities think they know who Jesus is, a sinner and a deceiver, and yet they can't say from where he came from. The reason that would be pertinent to them is that if Jesus was not from Bethlehem, then he couldn't possibly be the Messiah. His point of origin would tell them all they needed to know about who the man was, except they are ignorant of this. The incredulity of the authorities produces an equally powerful opposite reaction from the increasingly bold, formerly blind man. He retorts sarcastically, paraphrasing here, now that is truly remarkable. No one has ever healed a blind man like me before, and you don't even know where Jesus comes from. Yet you claim to know he is a sinner. But we all know God doesn't listen to sinners or give them healing powers. And yet here I am, living testimony that he heals people. He could do nothing if God had not empowered him and if he were not from God. To this there is no rebuttal, only another slur on the man's character as a supposed sinner. Ironically, they make the same false assumption as the disciples at the beginning of the story. Since this man was born blind, he must have been born in sin. And so the inevitable happens. He is expelled from their presence. But then the story takes another sudden right turn, as we will see next. So I hope you tune in tomorrow as we will look at John chapter 9, verses 35 and 41, and see where this story takes us. Have a great day, everybody.